Hi, welcome to another version of Liberty on Caffeine. This is a great day. It's the 27th and last Saturday that we have in the wonderful month of February. I mean, I can't believe it. We've got 2 months that have already vanished for this year. We're going into the third month. We've all survived. We're doing well. And today we're going to be talking about agorism. And of course, agorism comes from the root Greek word agora, which is the open marketplace. And we've got some great guests on today. And I just really think that you're going to enjoy today's show because it's something a little different, something you won't be hearing from most of the traditional podcasts that you have with the Liberty themes. So without further ado, we're going to, even though we started about 5 minutes late, we're going to start with our show on Agarism, Liberty on Caffeine. Welcome, everyone.
We want to get it on because we don't get along. We want to get it on because we don't get along.
What up? What up? Oh, yeah. Well, here I stand with the mic in my hand, and I will pray to the Lord. I do the best that I can, 'cause in a world where possession is a question of a man's word, but we all have the same nature. So I'm sticking around, and I'll be dropping it down. I'll be kicking my sound just like a smoke. Never quit because it makes my belly grow. I won't help me out of this one more time, and I say, can you help me? Can you help me get the hell out of here? Can you help me? Can you help me get the hell out? One for the money and two for the show. Three to get ready to bust down your door. And it's a one for the money and two for the show. Three to get ready to bust down your door. And hit the boom, boom, pack of my screws down so high. I never ever quit, people hitting like a trap. With the boom, boom, pack of my screws down so high. I never ever quit, people hitting like a trap.
And of course, we're going to start out with the expert on agorism. As far as I'm concerned, it's Matt Wobble, who has kind of created today's theme. He's also the one who has been behind the scenes learning how to do the production stuff, because I'm going to be leaning out and doing some more different little shows with Porcupine Pundit Productions. I've been having a little bit of a time crunch, a little bit of a money crunch, but that's the idea behind Porcupine Pundit Productions, is that we can all go ahead and produce our own shows. We always want to keep Liberty on Caffeine going for all of you. So without further ado, Matt, why don't you go ahead and introduce everybody today?
Oh, all right. That's easy enough. This good-looking guy with the no hair, that would be Will Detmering right there. Excellent character. He's been the guy talking right now. And then the guy with the hat on right here, that would be Mr. Steve Hoffman. He is a Liberty extraordinaire. And then we have a Mr. Jeff Harper. And if you ever want to get in a very interesting conversation about philosophy and liberty and whatnot, this guy will hold your attention for hours and will not disappoint. This right here is Josh Nesberg. Josh Nesberg is one of our young libertarians, and he's got an interesting coming to liberty story. And I'm just some old fart that just can't stop griping about government, pretty much. Very good.
Okay, so you've introduced this idea of agorism. You've used the term, and you've brought the idea behind agorism into many of our conversations, and both on and off the air, in the show, and in other different venues that we've had. So why don't you kind of give people an elevator pitch on agorism, what it is, what it means to you?
Can you still see me when I do this? Okay. First, I would point us to the 5 markets. Okay. Here's 5 very different markets. And imagine the top left-hand side is state approved. Okay. And that'll fit 2 of the markets. And imagine the top and the bottom of this chart is moral and immoral. Okay. So the things that are state approved and moral, we would call this the white market: legal employment, legal business, taxed goods, regulated goods, whatnot. Okay. The things that are state approved, but let's call them the pink market. Okay. War, taxation, state torture, imprisonment, compulsory education, right? I mean, they're state approved, but they're not really, they're not things we'd like to see in a free and open society. Okay. There's things that, if they weren't state subsidized, they might not even exist. Okay. So let's look over at the other areas, though, because I really want us to focus on the gray market for a minute. Okay. The things that are both moral but state not approved would be things that are banned unless done in a state-defined manner. The gray market would be like employment off the books, untaxed goods, unregulated goods, and of course things that are state banned are actual black market, like some drugs, sex trade, or I don't want to say sex trade, sex workers, some weapons. There's a lot of things that are clearly black market because the state has banned them. Let's go into what stuff that is completely immoral and is also state banned. This would be the red market. This is stuff like murder, theft, rape, slavery, maybe taxation. All right. But the idea that murder for hire is literally a business. You could pay somebody, a hitman, to take out somebody, and that would definitely be both immoral and illegal. So we're not really going to focus on that. What we're trying to focus on is on the things that are both moral and are banned unless done in a state-defined manner. The gray market, not the black market, not the white market, and not anything immoral. All right. You're able to see that. Thank you for putting that up there. All right. And that's my intro to it. To what agorism is. Maybe agorism would be best defined through a group called everythingvoluntary.com. You put everything-voluntary.com and you'll get to that page. But basically it explains agorism a little quicker, a little more to the point. What is agorism? It's revolutionary market anarchism. And a lot of people don't like the word anarchism, but more than a philosophy, agorism is a strategy from how to get from here to there. It's calling for competing with the system rather than competing from inside it. So just a couple things to keep in mind. And so we want to actually talk about what is it, why should it be put to good use, and how can it be used to create what we call individual exit. What is individual exit? You'll know individual exit from people's freedom stories. So
I have a question on the markets, Matt, if you got a second.
Yes, go ahead, Steve.
When reading up on agorism, one of the basic precepts of agorism is counter-economics. And when they discuss counter-economics, they include both the gray market and the black market. Why do you feel that we should focus our attention on the gray market rather than the black market?
That's an excellent question. If I can answer that in about a few words. It's really hard to sell the black market to people that think that the state is necessary to keep black market items from happening. There's two battles here. One is fighting for hearts and minds, and the other one is fighting for hearts and minds, but in a different way. One is you want to help people understand that doing things that are dangerous, immoral, maybe. Let me start from this angle. The state always uses to justify their existence things that are socially unacceptable that are part of the black market, if that makes sense. And so while philosophically we can agree that things in the black market, most of the things in the black market shouldn't be, especially the things that are not immoral, the more objectionable they are, the more that we end up fighting two battles at the same time. For instance, if we sold eggs without charging tax, if my friend sells T-shirts without charging tax, we can easily explain that we don't want to participate in the theft of taxation like that. But if we're talking about, how to sell hard drugs to elementary school students, that's a totally different conversation. That makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment on that if you don't mind.
Okay.
Basically, many of the things in what's the so-called black market would be criminal activities. There's legal standards anyway. Now, there are things in there, Matt mentioned selling hard drugs to school children, which obviously would be criminal by any standards. So far as morality goes, I don't think it's very easy or possible to legislate morality. I think that's more of a societal cultural trait. But so the gray market would be things that would not necessarily be criminal, but would not necessarily fall into the guidelines of the positive law or man-made laws of the government, like taxation is a man-made law and a violation of property rights, for example. So therefore, not taxing would be a gray market, but it's basically created due to the government regulations in the first place. And that's my interpretation of the gray market.
I could talk to this a little bit. I think of, whenever I think of things like agorism, I think of this idea, this concept, as we have on Off-Grid Outpost, which is a very good resource. The idea that every interaction in society should be voluntary, really at its core, voluntarism. Any relationship that uses force or coercion is immoral and should be avoided regardless of its status under the law. That's a pretty good definition. That's something that I think of when I think of things like agorism. Everything voluntary.
So Jeff, more to what you're saying, the line on these on the 5 markets, we're definitely crossing the line over what is considered legal versus illegal. But I think it's important to point out that slavery was legal, segregation was legal. There's a lot of things that were illegal that wasn't moral. And on the opposite side of things, there are things that are moral that are also illegal. And it helps to help bring people in with an understanding of the law by Frederick Bastiat, because people that go, I'm a law-abiding citizen, I challenge them. And after about 3 questions, I call them out on it and say, you don't really sound like you have a good understanding of what law actually is. They think law is whatever a tyrant might call legal versus illegal. And what's lawful is actually what helps protect life, liberty, and property, not what actually offends life, liberty, and property, which is what a lot of our current, quote, laws actually do. And so if me selling trading t-shirts for eggs or something like this without putting the middleman of a robber, taxation, government, the state, whatever you want to call the thief at the moment, in between the two of us, while it may be illegal, it's definitely not immoral. In fact, what's more immoral is to give in to the theft. It's not immoral to avoid theft. It is immoral to accept theft without trying to fight against it.
Right. The statement I made was criminal versus legal. Crime is where you harm another person or their property, and those are definitely black market items. Whereas illegal is open to interpretation because they're normally man-made laws, and positive laws can be changed by man. So that's the difference that I use there. Now, so far as legislating morality, let's take, for example, the idea of sex workers.
Good.
If it's a mutual contract between 2 consenting adults and no one is harmed and their property is not harmed, then it's their business. That's the way I see the difference between the black market and the gray market. And criminal versus illegal and moral versus immoral in society, and the ability to legislate morality and law. And
so we have a
license sooner.
Okay, he's probably going to
license on crimes, for example.
So, Steve, I think you had a comment.
Not really. I'm just listening to your discussion. It's very interesting. I'd like to hear a lot more about Agarism. There is a risk in trading without the condolences of the government.
Right.
All you have to do is research the guy by the name of Ross Ulbricht, who's currently serving 2 life sentences in a federal prison in Tucson because he ran a dark website. He just ran the site. He didn't engage in any of these transactions. He just was the founder of the site. And the federal government does not like competition. So he's arrested and they put him in a cave. You don't abide by our rules. We rule by the barrel of a gun. You're now incarcerated. So there is a bit of a risk. How much of a risk is there in the type of agorism that you're talking about?
Okay, so there's a lot to be said for freedom networks, and this happens quite a bit in the barter industry, and I think there's a comment that we really should address here real quick. When we talk about the 5 different markets, and Justico Mitchell from Facebook says, selling kids that cannot consent is immoral. Absolutely. It's not only not part of the gray market, it's more. Where was that?
I think it was the red quadrant in terms of where pink. Someone is harmed. Yes,
there it is.
The
okay.
red market.
It's definitely the red market. This is like murder, theft, rape, and slavery. So this is definitely not part of the agorism that we're condoning or communicating about. It's not even part of the black market. This would be more like something that is both banned and immoral, and we would have to agree that kind of stuff is absolutely off limits altogether. On a personal basis, I believe that the age of consent ought to be 25. So when you talk about somebody that has the inability to consent, I think, well, and I might step on your toes a little bit as a 23-year-old.
Someone who's not yet 25. Yes, you are indeed removing my ability to trade in the market.
No, I would say to fully consent to certain things, like long-term contracts or other things that can become, in essence, a long-term contract. When you do anything that would create life, that is literally making a long-term contract.
Sure.
Well, wait a minute. I want to pimp out Josh. I mean, we got to lower it to 23.
I don't know.
No, I disagree.
Well, you have to.
It should be age 70.
Well, there's a reason why.
No, that's the upper cup is 69.
I have a great example of agorism and how it existed before the term existed. I think it was created in the 70s by a libertarian economist, if I'm not mistaken. But if you look back at the founding of the country in the early 1700s, mid 1700s, we had the taxes and lack of representation from England, the tea tax, other intolerable acts, etc. And the black market existed due to those taxation, due to that taxation. And the East India Tea Company had a monopoly on the tea established by government regulation. And the colonists were buying smuggled tea that was imported from the Dutch tea they were purchasing, and other supplies that were over attack. So it's the fact that the government creates these regulations and these positive laws that we have a gray market, or one that can exist in the first place. Because if you don't violate natural law and you don't steal people's property and you don't covet, then the gray market is the actual free market. And that's what people fail to understand. The government, the black market exists because of crimes and so forth, obviously. But let's take, if you want to put some of these other, quote, immoral acts into that category, then that would be government regulation, and that would create a black market. And more of the same thing, perpetuate. So now I'm not talking about selling, illegal substances to children because they're not mature enough to make the decision. If an adult decides to do it that hurts only them, it may not be best in their best interest, but it's still their right to choose that option. But in the long run, what it boils down to is this is not a new concept. It existed in the colonies. It existed in other societies. That when government takes from you by theft, then you're going to find alternative means to avoid it if possible.
It wasn't just the British taxation of tea. Another example would be U.S. interference in the marketplace with the whiskey rebellion about the same time, where the federal government stepped in with some unconstitutional taxes.
No, let's take alcohol. People say alcohol is okay, but if you look at it, it's a vice, it's immoral. If you get drunk and drive, hurt people, it does a lot of damage in the world. When they outlawed it, it created a black market and criminalized it and made powerful liquor lords today we have drugs outlaw creating drug czars, and that's why I say that that's part of that's not black market. That's you can't do it that way because then you just create the opportunity. Government regulations on adults not harming one another and living how they choose is an issue, and that's the big issue, and that's what creates agorism in the first place.
Absolutely. Hey, can we, Will? I was wondering if you could, you were about to put up this little picture right here. If I could speak on this real quick, right? Everybody who takes a look at this might recognize this number. Feel free to call it any time. It happens to go to right here to this phone. My son Joshua Paul has around 37 eggs, 37 chickens. 34 of them are actually egg layers. The other 3 are roosters, and try as I might, I can't get them to lay a single egg. But they do seem to keep the hens happy and safe. But the way I try to explain it is this: if somebody his age, he's 12. If somebody his age, let's say a young lady, 13, 14 years old, were to be employed to be a babysitter, so a couple could go on a date. When they got back and handed her, I don't know, $40, is she going to turn around and make a little phone call to the IRS and say, hey, will you please take $10 off my hands?
No, it depends, doesn't it, on how stupid the person is?
Pretty much. But most young people are going to be like, no, that was cash. I earned that. Well, they need to apply that to every area of their lives. In some ways, for some reason, in between when you first start earning cash and a little bit later, you kind of start to accept the inevitability of government theft. And I think what we really want to do is to teach adults how to have the wisdom of children, if that makes sense. That if it's not yours, it doesn't belong to you. And if you want to reach and you take it, it doesn't belong to you. How are our chickens, our eggs, our quality, his business, how is it regulated? It's regulated by individual consumer choice. And this is a whole lot more superior to legislative regulation. And you're going to have regulation one way or the other. And the difference really isn't whether it's regulated or not. It's what kind of regulation. In truth, government regulation hampers market regulation. So the thing is, do you really want 535 lawyers in Washington, D.C. deciding, what you can and can't put on your kitchen table or who you can and can't buy from? And when they do, then that disrupts the natural market signals of, and I'll put it this way, if we don't keep our customers happy, our competitors will. And that's how it ought to be in every business, where each interaction is voluntary.
Yes.
Want to add something to
Yes.
that?
Well, I just in some of the stuff that you are showing me about notes for this show today, there was a line in one of them about there's no such thing as an unregulated market, and I'm having the good fortune now to read a book that you've recommended called Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, and it's true. There is no such thing as an unregulated market. There is exactly what you're talking about. It's either regulated by the coercive state or by the consumers, people that actually buy and sell, who actually have skin in the game, who know what's going on. And as an informed consumer, you're able to make the decision about where to put your money versus having the state protect some actors over all actors. And this is the thing that Hazlitt kind of goes into: unintended consequences. And when it comes to the state intervention in the economy, protecting some parts of the economy at the expense of the others. For instance, with things like tariffs, things like taxation.
Yes, especially tariffs. Absolutely.
Let's if you don't mind, we're going to take a short break and then come back and continue the conversation.
Very good.
Braxton was diagnosed with choroid plexus carcinoma, a brain tumor. St. Jude is helping us put away our fears. We have an amazing team that fights for the best outcome for Braxton. He has the best chance here. I don't have to worry that how much is that bag of fluid going to cost me? Can I afford it to save my child's life? The donations, they're paying for me to live every day with my son, be stress-free, and enjoy every day with him. I wish there was a word bigger than thank you, more close to the heart. because thank you's not enough. They've given me hope. They've given me my son.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Can I make a comment on the regulation? Are we ready? Government regulation of the marketplace is not only not in the best interest of consumers, it can be extremely dangerous. All you have to do is look at the COVID crisis last year. Because of government regulation, Americans were denied the use of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And if you look at the death rate in the United States of COVID, it was like 10, 20 times higher than it is in India or places in Africa where those two drugs are allowed. So government regulation is not just annoying, it kills people. So it actually kills people.
I'm going to have to play a little bit of devil's advocate on this because I'm more of an anarchist than an anarchist. Tariffs, for example, are a form of taxation, but they are voluntary. If you don't want to pay the tax, you don't have to sell goods in the country. And they were used by the founders to provide revenue for the country. And they also protected the jobs and the industries in the country. The thing about business is it's not beholden to any state, any country, or anything else, only to the shareholders. There's plenty of examples of unregulated industry going rampant, from the rebellion at the coal miners in West Virginia, where the rednecks came from, to working at the company for the company, getting company money, having to stay in the company house, paying rent to them, buy your food from the company store. During Depression, ketchup was loaded with red paint. So there is the extreme of, if you have, quote, too free of a market, you also have people that will take advantage. And, so that's the reason that a menarchy is more ideal to me.
That sounds great. Can we continue a conversation on that just a little bit before we move into some individual exit stories? Is that all right? Let's talk about this for a second. The market always provides what the market demand has for. In other words, if there's market demand for rotten meat, you're going to get rotten meat. But what is the market demand for rotten meat? It's actually negative. There's negative demand for rotten meat, spoiled milk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Therefore, if there is no market demand for it, the market doesn't provide for that. Now, and Jeff mentions an interesting issue, and it's an important one. What is the demand then for market regulation that would verify that what you're putting out there is kosher? Oops, kosher. Now, who should handle what is or isn't, halal or kosher? That's not the FDA. These are private organizations. What about whether if something is safe, electronically speaking? Maybe it has a UL certification. It's interesting. The more that we study how well government does at actually regulating versus how free market does at actually regulating, I can't think of any decent example where government regulates better than the market from the consumer's perspective. From the government's perspective, hey, the government's the best regulator, because if you're trying to make sure that that you have protected the people that are sending you a good bit of campaign donations, you could also call those bribes, then yeah, government regulation is absolutely the best way for that. Let's talk about individual exit for a minute.
And you don't.
No, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
So you would say tariffs are wrong, even though they're voluntary.
How is a tariff voluntary?
Because you don't pay it if you don't import products to the country. That's a tariff.
But isn't it something imposed on you by the state?
So if I go to
imposed? No, it's voluntary. You have to
So-
choose to sell the product here or not. You don't have to pay. You don't have to sell a product in a country. You don't have to pay a tax.
So if I were to go to the
Completely
grocery
voluntary.
No, I mean it's a good question. Hey, get him out of here, please. If I go to the grocery store to buy avocados, and I have a choice to buy the California avocado for $6, or the Mexican avocado for $6.50 because it has a tariff on it. Where did my freedom of choice to buy directly from the Mexican avocado farmer for $4.50 go?
The same place it did when the American farmer has to pay their employees and pay taxes and so forth, that the Mexican farmer isn't paying it either. So yes, you can get your product cheaper, but then you're not going to have most of that government regulation again. If you had no taxation,
so if I could get the product cheaper
out of America.
So if I could get the product cheaper, understanding that I maybe take on a higher risk of eating E. coli or something ridiculous like this, I mean, to the extreme, shouldn't I still have the choice as a free person to choose to do the more risky behavior at a cheaper cost?
Choosing poorly as well as choosing well.
Perhaps.
If you have the knowledge to make the choice, if you're provided that information up front. If you look at, let's say, for example, these companies that poison people in their manufacturing and try to deny it. Where do you go for that? You're going to turn to your neighbor and they're going to help you out with it. You know, companies are not your friends. They're not your buddies. They're not your companions. They're not human beings. They don't have compassion. They're not beholden to any country or anything other than their stockholders and their profit, period. And you can go look at Jefferson will tell you that, okay? So you do need something to control, because they are capable of being, even without regulation, of being evil and harming others and getting away with it because you have nowhere to turn.
Matt, I do have one comment.
Yeah.
I'm not going to debate whether or not tariffs are good or bad, but I will say that tariffs do violate the economic principle of comparative advantage. There are countries that can actually make things cheaper than we can, and the principle of comparative advantage would say we should then buy those products and sell them products that we can make cheaper. That's called comparative advantage.
Like an apple that's out of season and an American farmer can't provide it. Thank you for that, Justico. But perhaps a banana. We wouldn't even be eating pineapples or bananas if we weren't buying internationally. But I don't think that they should be bumped just because somebody's found a way of producing an American banana or an American pineapple, that now we should, quote, protect the pineapple supply in Hawaii.
What if that country, say China, for example, is manipulating the value of their currency to sell to us for less? And it's an unlevel playing field. They're not going to be necessarily following your same principles. These other countries don't do that. You know, so you can't really just say that an avocado grower in Mexico is just taking their product and sending it to you scot-free.
So let's talk about some freedom stories, but let's go back up to they're not following the same principles for a second. Josh, would you just share what are like some of the things that brought you to freedom versus a typical mentality of somebody your age that says, you know, government's always right?
Oh, well, if it comes to that particular story, it was a bit of a journey. Started out as a conservative and moved towards libertarianism and free market capitalism and things of that nature. What I really think, and it's interesting, you raise an interesting point. Well, what if it is in the case of China and they're not playing by the same rules that whatever America is playing by or other countries are playing by? I understand that objection. It's pretty reasonable. The thing I think to think about is that they sort of have their autonomy. And you actually said at one point, we can take advantage of that. And the thing is, in a day and time where the internet exists, where we know where the human rights violations are going, where we know how the market is performing, we can take advantage of them, so to speak, being communist in the sense that we can say, hey, so there's product, I don't know, in Walmart produced by China, for instance. And we know, I think Matt's actually told me, something like 75% of the stuff in Walmart is carried in China or created in China, excuse me. So the question becomes, if you want to buy American and high American and do that, whenever you go to Walmart, are you mad every time you come out of it? Because I think people should have the decision. If they want to go shop at Walmart and buy something that's cheap, they can. If they want to buy something built in America, I work with tools a lot. Snap-on is completely created in America. The name brand Snap-on tools, but they're very expensive. They're much more expensive than other tools created in other countries, for instance. So as consumers, we can make, and this kind of goes to being informed. Am I going to pay for a cheaper tool that's going to break down faster or a more expensive one? I think people should be able to do that without tariffs is really the core of what I'm saying.
Real quick, if I mind me jumping in on this one. Okay. The book Production of Security is a really good challenge for why the free market should take over something that most people pursue.
Molinari, right?
Gustave de Molinari. Yeah. He goes into why security is an exception and why security should not be an exception. But the idea is that most people you talk to, especially conservatives and most liberals, say that there is a place for government, or even minarchists say that there's a place for government to be the provider of security. And if you go back to Benjamin Franklin, he says whenever you trade off essential liberties for temporary security, you never get either one. So why should security be an exception? We are constantly led to ask ourselves whether this exception is well-founded in the eyes of the economist. It offends reason to believe that a well-established natural law can admit of exceptions. Natural law must hold everywhere and always or be invalid. I cannot believe, for example, that the universal law of gravitation, which governs the physical world, is ever suspended at any instance or in any point in the universe. Now, I consider an economic laws comparable to natural laws and have as much faith in the principle of the division of labor as I have in the universal law of gravitation. Right. I believe while these principles can be disturbed, they admit of no exceptions. Okay, so this is either logical and true, or else the principles on which economic science is based are invalid. So it's either true or it's false. So do the laws of supply and demand extend to everywhere in the universe as we know it? Absolutely. What about the laws of supply and demand in China? Yeah. What about here? Yeah. Actually, no matter how much the CCP would like to deny free markets, what they've actually done is they've insisted to be 51% owner in every company that does business in China. Now, that just means that they're better at theft. It doesn't mean that they're better at the free market, right? But for us to take advantage of that, if they're going to ruin their own currency to help feed us, I think there's going to be a payback there somewhere. I can't imagine that the laws of supply and demand somehow get warped just because we're dealing with things that are so big that we're not able to wrap our minds around them. And if you take on whether a principle is good or not, go back to 3 people on an island. And if the principle holds up to 3 people on an island, then it will hold up to 3 large countries interacting. Why do we need why do we need the police state or a totalitarian form of government to, quote, work on our behalf? I mean, that seems counterproductive to try to, quote, protect us from Chinese goods. Who are they really protecting? Maybe they're just protecting big donors to their campaigns. I don't see that as minarchism. I see that as statism.
I'm not talking about a totalitarian government that you're referring to. That's not a minarchist government. I'm talking about a limited government, a limited republic as established by the founders. Okay, if these guys violate those rights and we allow them to violate split their bonds and do more, and we allow them to, that's our fault. Yes, all government is tyranny. You must give up rights to have established government in the first place. On the other hand, you can take 3 people on an island and they can live in socialism or communism or a free market, and they're going to be just fine because you're only talking about 3 people. They can be an anarchist. Now you're talking about 300 million people. That's a whole different topic. Show me anywhere in the world. Show me the great society established on anarcho-capitalism that's existed there, ever existed.
3 people on an island, always live in laissez-faire capitalism. Prove me wrong.
Show me the successful anarcho-capitalist society, a large society based on anarcho-capitalism.
In the 1800s, we were living in it.
When? Where?
In the 1800s, we were living in it.
We had a constitution. We had a government, a central government called the Constitution of the United States was established at that time. We weren't an anarchist society.
Oh, we're going to get hung up on anarchism. How about using the word voluntarism? No. I would say that we did have a voluntary society, but I think what we're talking about is.
Well, how about not call a monarchy government a totalitarian government, and then I won't use my term either.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. A monarchist government is more statist than a free marketer would prefer, and I understand that. And you're basically saying that the free market requires a state. The free market requires a state.
That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is what Thomas Jefferson says. There's three types of government. There is total government control. There's complete anarchy, and then there's everything in between.
Sure.
And that the Indians lived in an anarchic society because they were small groups rather than a large society. And as they continued to progress, like the Cherokees did, they started to establish more advanced government. And the only way to establish a large, successful society is to have some kind of central government or governance in general. And that's what I'm basing my principles on.
Sure.
The same ones Jefferson used to found the country in the first place.
I would say the only way to have a successful society is to remove the same state that you think is absolutely necessary for it. And I understand.
Where it's been done and successful, then I'll believe it.
Say again?
Tell me where it's been done and succeeded, and I'll believe it.
So the question is government a necessary evil?
According to the founders of the country, yes.
Okay, so you're saying that evil is necessary, and I'm only just saying that evil is not necessary. And
so I tell me where it's worked without it anywhere, and I can agree with you in a large society.
I think we're coming down to
what we did in our federal government didn't just come out of thin air. It was actually in practice in the colonies beforehand and successful there before we utilized it as a central government.
Look, if somebody said you like cancer or limited cancer, I think there's a third option, and it's like no cancer.
Okay, are we talking about cancer here?
You just said government was evil, and I said evil is not necessary, and you said that evil is necessary. I mean, I get what we're saying, but let's move forward on
evil.
Yeah, absolutely. How much of it would you prefer? None, right?
Well, I would prefer not to have cancer, but let's say, for example, you had 300 million people trying to live on this island with no rules. How's that going to go for you?
Well, in Ireland, for about 1,000 years, we did have a successful anarcho-capitalist society. It was from the year 650 to 1650.
Tribal, very tribal, very nice.
Okay, and how well did that work for them? I would imagine for about 1,000 years, it seemed to work pretty well. If you talk about, it's okay. I don't really think I think our discussion is more about agorism.
Agarism.
And individual exit.
Can I make some comments?
Yeah, can we have?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but it just seems that there's been a lot of great discussion. But I know you've been raising your hand patiently for some time, so please go ahead.
So, getting back to the discussion of agorism, if the book, the New Libertarian Manifesto, does talk about government, and it's more from a anti-government perspective. What do you call the people that don't like government? It's anarchy. It's a form of anarchism, civil disobedience for government. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that agorism is individual exit from government. Agorism is profitable civil disobedience to government. The whole concept of agorism is to get government out of our lives so that we can actually be free individuals. Now, obviously, that's not where I'm coming from because I'm a member of the Republican Liberty Caucus. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party. I suffer from the disease known as partyarchy, which is also addressed in the New Libertarian Manifesto. So, yeah, our culture, we've been indoctrinated since we were born that government is good, the political parties are good. Well, guess what? They're not. I'll turn it over to you for discussion.
So, if we want to talk about individual exit, I think we want to talk about how people can do more to, and let's use the popular phrase, go off grid. A lot of people have figured out how to go galt or go off grid while staying productive members of their local society. And so going off grid doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go live like a hermit out in the woods or way out in the middle of nowhereville. It can mean that you just little by little subtract yourself from the system so that you're not empowering the system that's working against you. And I think that that's a very good moral state to be in, to say, look, I'm a voluntarist because I believe that every relationship you have must be voluntary, else it is immoral. And we don't make any exceptions for the state. If
It's
the
nonviolent, that's good.
Right. And to initiate violence is absolutely wrong, right?
Absolutely. Always.
But violence is self-defense. That's not an initiation of violence, and that's everybody's right. Now, if Josh is my neighbor and Josh says, hey, Matt, if I get attacked, will you come protect me? And I say, yeah, but vice versa, man. If you see somebody coming over here, would you come over and join forces with me? And we say, absolutely. We could grow that to be a neighborhood wide. We could add 5 or 6 neighborhoods in. We could decide at that point that we're going to offload some of that responsibility to either a rotating individual voluntary militia type or mix it in with some that are literally on payroll to have paid security. But my experience with paid security has been very, very positive as compared to experiences with those that, well, they don't really have a market signal for what they do. What market signal is better than saying, you know what, if you don't keep the customer happy, you're going to get fired? There's not much better market signal where that leaves the consumer king. And if you're paying into a particular, whether it's an HOA or you're in a large apartment complex, was my situation. We were in a large apartment complex and we're having some issues, and the people realized that if we have these continued issues, we're moving out. And if we move out, the security guy is likely to get fired. Well, what's the security guy going to do? He's going to do a whole lot better than the local county sheriff would do. Local county sheriff wants to write a report, and if there's no actual illegal activity that he must absolutely enforce, he's not going to do anything about it. But if there's just things that are just absolutely worrisome and bothersome to the point that they may make you want to move, well, your local paid security is going to do more for it.
Sure, it's the potential for abuse is much less so whenever, like you're saying, your employment is contingent upon you keeping the customer happy. That's definitely true.
Well, there's been a lot of HOAs established here in South Carolina that weren't very popular among the people who joined them.
Good questions in here, or maybe statements here. South Carolina does have a private police. They serve warrants and all that. Interesting.
The homeowners association.
Okay, Agarism kind of bridge between anarchists, if you think about it. So, not abolition. It's about ignoring the state. Absolutely. So, I think the goal of most abolitionists is to destroy the issue that they're trying to abolish. Whereas agorists are more trying to make the state irrelevant through the market. And if the state truly had to compete, they would go out of business.
Matt?
Yeah. You're breaking up, Matt.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
But so far as the state
Caveat
competing in
emptor, right? Buyer
so far
beware.
as the state not being able to compete. Definitely agree with that. It's been proven more than once with monopolies on, say, trash services, where the state's running in the red doing them, and they open it up to competition and
Right.
contracts.
Caveat emptor is the Latin phrase for buyer beware, and it's a legal precedent that says, if you signed a contract that says we could make your HOA rates double every year if we felt like it, maybe that's not the kind of HOA you should be buying into. But so many people just fly blind into, oh, yay, we're getting our first house, and they don't really care.
A lot of people.
And
Matt, whenever you're ready.
you'll hear HOA horror stories
Oh yeah, go ahead.
all the time. Well, it sounds like that is then increasing the market demand for a freedom-based HOA.
That's true.
Matt, can I butt in here?
Yeah.
Hello?
I'm not a fan of HOAs either. I don't live in one.
I'd like to get back to agorism.
Well,
Can
he
I
was
just have a
talking
minute,
about
kind of a closing. Are we online? Okay.
I can hear you, Matt.
So-
Matt, you're lagging. You can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Nothing's legible.
We're running out of time here, and I'd just like to close it that we're talking about agorism and like it's a strange thing. Well, believe it or not, what I found on the internet, most of the world, the black and gray markets far outweigh the white government regulated markets through most of the world. And
Right.
so Jeff Foxworthy used to have a thing where you might be a redneck.
Absolutely.
Well, you might be an agorist.
You know what? The big thing about
Can I-
the state is it's a monopoly of force, and so it absolutely removes all level of competition. Here's an individual exit story that I think might be helpful. How many individual exit stories do you think we have just over the past year with people who have been forced to homeschool their own kids, who then realize the kind of garbage that's coming in, and now
Look, you're still breaking up.
And in
Man.
the back.
The state doesn't even want you to be able to, get off grid. They make it illegal to collect rainwater. They make it illegal to
Go ahead,
run
Steve.
your own power system. They write regulations right and left. All of these things are
Steve?
violations of our natural rights.
I'm here.
Maybe you can't hear us.
I can hear you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, somebody else was talking. But,
We can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to close out because we're running out of time. But, you might be a redneck you might be an agorist if you go faster than the speed limit. Anytime you buy illegal drugs, including unlicensed alcohol, you might be an agorist. Anytime you pay somebody or get paid under the table or off the books, you might be an agorist. Anytime you build an unpermitted structure on your own private property, you might be an agorist. Anytime you pay back or get paid back by a friend more than $60 without claiming it on your income tax, you might be an agorist. Anytime you sell or buy anything on Craigslist or online that's more than $60 and you don't claim it on your tax records, you might be an agorist. Anytime you pay for something or leave a tip in cash without sales or income tax applied, you're an agorist. Anytime you own or do anything forbidden by the state, which does not harm anyone else, guess what? You're an agorist. Have a good one, you guys. I'm gone.
I'm open. Oh, we're already past our 45 minutes. Are they talking? Are you back?
Yeah, more like.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you.
Well,
Great
do you want to
show.
wrap up the show right quick?
That's it.
Yeah, that's
That's
wonderful.
it. They're
This has
gone.
been a great discussion, and thank you so much, everybody.
And it looks like it's down to us if it's still
good.
streaming at all. And I know we are running out, but yeah, that was a great list, Steve. Yeah, Lisa Bean says, "Send me that list." That's good stuff. So it's great to be able to have like discussions on kind of what the line is. Let's say ignoring the overbearing reach of a, let's be fair, what we have now, a totalitarian police state, is agorism, right? It's just basic. We like the word freedom. We like the word liberty. We like the word voluntarism. I think so often we have very patriotic Americans that think, yo, MAGA, 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 or yo, I'm for the red team versus the blue team. When in truth, they need to dig down a little deeper as to what principles they are really firmly planted on. Because if the red team lets them down on principles, they need to call them out just as fast as if the blue team is totally against those principles. So the goal really should be maximum liberty. And I think Reagan put it best when he says, man is not free unless government is limited. Other thing that Ludwig von Mises said, there's only three options. He says, there's either the state or the market. I'm sorry. He says there's either the state or the market. There is no third option. There is no third option. So once you mix the state in with any free market solution, it actually becomes statism. Just like if you were to put poison into a whole gallon of water, you don't have water anymore. You have poison.
Hold on. It's saying that we're muted. Let me mute and unmute right quick. Yeah, go back in. Yeah, go back to hit unmute right quick.
All right, here we go.
Can y'all hear us?
There's nobody else on there.
I know that's that. Someone said that we're muted.
We were talking muted for a while.
Yeah, I think we were.
That's hilarious.
That is funny.
All right, so let's go recap real quick.
Yeah.
For anybody that's still on here.
To quote Ludwig von Mises, he
said, Ludwig von Mises says there's either the state or the market. There is no third option. So once you start mixing in state with something, and what the state likes to call this is public-private partnerships. Mm-hmm. You know, what this is let's make a partnership of poison and water, and what do you have?